We are Barton, no, James Brown. James Brown from Barton Spring Mills, right here on the screen. Oh, we're on
Howdy.
TV.
How are
Hey,
you?
how are you? I'm so happy to see you.
Good to hear from you.
This is awesome. Look,
Oh, that's awesome.
so James, thank you so much for joining me and telling us a little bit about what's going on in Texas during all of this this new world we
Yeah,
have.
it's been crazy.
I bet. When did things begin to change for you?
We started talking about it. I think the week of March 13th. We have a weekly staff meeting, and one of my staff members said, "Hey, what are we going to do about this?" And I said, well, "What do you mean? What are we going to do about this?" And so, fortunately, I felt like we had a week sort of to get ourselves prepared. We wrote our own sort of COVID methodology for in-house sanitation and how we were going to deal with things if they, if things got worse, which they did. So
Mm-hmm.
hats off to my staff for thinking ahead and being very forward thinking about that. So we had sanitation protocols in place. And there was still a little bit of a lull before the orders started coming in after the stores got depleted, but we sort of had our act together. We were fortunate.
And how has it affected your milling operations?
Oh, well, so we were mostly a wholesale miller, doing some retail here at the mill, farmers markets, and online. And suddenly we pivoted to almost no wholesale and doing mostly retail online. I tried for a couple of weeks to do curb pickup, and we had to stop that. It just too dangerous for me and for my employees, and also disruptive to just getting flour out the door. So um, just as a for instance, this last year between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we would do about 10,000 pounds, about 5 tons, mostly wholesale. Right now we're at about 30,000 pounds a week, but it's not going into 50-pound bags. It's going into 2.5 and 5-pound bags, and that's an entirely different matter.
Do you have a bagger, an automated bagger, or is it going in one arm, arm by
Mhm.
arm? We got to get some repetitive strain. You got lots of stretches in
We
there.
do.
I'm going to coach your staff on, oh my God, those repetitive things are
Yeah,
rough.
we've
Wow.
worked on that a little bit. We have one of the, I guess, one of the bright spots for me in this is that we've been able to employ 8 additional employees. Many of these were former chefs and bakers that were our wholesale clients are now here working with us. And we have 4 people every shift in the bagging room and 4 every shift in the fulfillment room. And they shift responsibility, so they're not doing the same thing all the time. And then I have 3 millers now, not including myself, and we're milling about 20 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot of
Yeah, it
flour.
is.
Holy cow. When you said that 10,000, did you say 10,000 pounds for the period around Thanksgiving to
Yeah.
Christmas? That was the whole period?
Just a week. And so now we've gone
A
to
week. Okay.
almost 30,000 a week.
That's stunning. That's stunning. So all that means a lot of people are discovering your flower, and that's great. It's also
Yeah.
awful that it took this crisis to make it happen because those of us who had this stuff spring on us were like, yeah, this is what is amazing, right? This is really incredible, flavorful stuff. Um, But let's talk a little, describe your actual setup for folks so that they know how many mills you have and how, your grain storage and all of
Yeah.
that.
So we just moved into our new facility. This is BSM 2.0. We were fortunate that we work with Treaty Oak Distillery, providing a lot of grain for them for making gin and bourbon and whiskey and rye. and we were having to transport so much grain back and forth. Finally, the owner said, "Why don't I just sell you 2.5 acres and you build your new facility here?" And so that's what we did. So we're now in
Cool.
about 18,500 square foot facility. It's made up of two buildings. We have the main building that has the mill room, our new education center, which is about 1,000 square feet. And then we're leasing 2,500 square feet to Abby Love of Abby Jane Bakery. She's still mid-process getting the facility built out, but she'll be sharing that front building with us. And then we have about 10,000 square feet that is storage, seed cleaning, and hammer milling for brewing and distilling. We've got two Osteroller mills, a 1200 and an A 1600. That'll make about 465 pounds of flour an hour. We do have a Great Western sifter, and we do some sifted products. And then let's see what else. Then our storage will hold about, if we're packed to the rafters, about 400 tons.
And these, I've seen pictures of the storage stuff. It's shelving with 2,000-pound totes on it,
Yeah,
correct?
we're pushing that a little bit now. We're putting about 2,250 in a bag in order to make the most use of the space safely. But yeah, about 2,250.
Wow. That's amazing. So what are some of the grains that you have in there? And let's get deeper on that.
Yeah, so well, it depends on the day. Things are looking a little thin right now. We're coming up on June harvest. Texas is exclusively a winter wheat state. We don't do spring, so we're coming up on the June harvest. I'm working with this year anywhere between 6 and 8 farmers. So we have I think about 250 acres under wheat and rye right now. We specialize in mostly landrace varieties, and we've got Red Fife, Turkey Red, Rouge de Bordeaux, and then we have some ancient grains. We're growing our own Oberkulmer spelt. We spot buy einkorn still. That's on our to-do list for this next year. We have two kinds of rye, Danko and Renz Abruzzi, and then as an afterthought, we got into corn, and now we're really big into corn. I have 6 or 7 varieties of dent corn that we make grits and polenta and cornmeal and corn flour from. So when we're fully stocked, we usually have 8 different hard red winter wheat varieties, and I have 8 more land races in development that we got from a gene plasm bank. So 3 of those will come online this year: Quana, Purple Straw, and Mediterranean, which is actually a soft red that was predominantly grown in Texas around the time of that first wheat classification report that came out in 1919.
That's so cool. So that puts you in a real pinch if you are specifically a fall planted zone to get into a place where you've got your crop.
Yeah.
It's all set. So whoever discovers you is gonna have to also love corn, because you got more capacity to get more corn now. But the wheat is it's constrained, right?
Well, I'm contracting with the farmers to grow specifically a number of acres of what I want of each thing. So we project what we think we're going to need, and we're still making this up as we go along. We're only 3 years into our business. So you make optimistic but realistic projections, because in my current model, for better or for worse, in the month of June, I will purchase all of my wheat for the year, which means I have to have the money to buy all of my wheat for the entire year in June. So we have to keep a sinking fund all year long and keep that topped off. Last year we had all these bumper crops, and there was more wheat than we actually thought there would be. Fortunately, we were prepared for that. But this year, I'm hoping the same thing's going to happen, but you don't know. And then we have relationships with some other farmers too, where we can spot buy if we need to. I'm really concerned with buying regionally and selling regionally. but there will
Yep.
come a time. We had freezes last week, and we're waiting to see if we're going to have freeze damage. So, those are realistic outcomes that have to be dealt with, and I can't sell nothing. So, it may be that we have to go further afield. We'll see. That's the nature of farming.
Yes, and I think you and I have had conversations about how hard it is for anyone who's not farming to appreciate the gamble that grow. Oh, that's what I was going to remember. When you gave me these hats, I was giving them away at the Young Farmers
Hmm.
Conference, and I said, "Do you want their name? Want me to collect emails or anything?" And you said, farming's hard enough." And there's this thing that once you start to learn a little bit about what growers have to face, it's how they even do it, why they even do it. Talk a little bit about your connections with growers and how you work with them, because I know that so much of that work is unseen.
Yeah, I thought that most of what I was going to be doing was be standing by the mill, watching the mill go around, and really that's obviously very important, but it's a small part of it. And I think the most important part, and frankly the most rewarding part, is my work with the farmers, my farmer partners. Um, you know, I wasn't in this business at all. I came from a completely different profession. So I just figured out a methodology that worked for me, which was I found a website that had listed farmers. It was called Agrilicious. I think it still exists. And it was just someone put together a website where farmers would be offered a single page where they could say, my name's John, I'm in La Mesa, Texas, and I grow organic wheat, and here's my phone number, and here's my email address. So I went through and mined that entire website and found about 30 farmers who said they were growing grain organically, and I phoned every one of them. And out of those, about 10 agreed to meet with me. And then I got in the car and went and met with them. And we had a meal together, and I asked questions that I thought were important. Glenn Roberts had been giving me some advice, and so I had this questionnaire that I essentially ran down, and hoping that once we got to the end, they would feel confident that I'd asked the right questions, as somebody who was totally untrained and unacquainted, and would feel confident enough to work with me. Fortunately or unfortunately, all 10 said yes that I met with. So then I had to pare it down. It turns out over time, I've ended up working with all of those farmers, and we talk probably weekly or at least twice a month. Those relationships are personal, and I'm intimate with what's going on with their families, and they with me, and they take that very seriously. I do too. I try to make as many spot visits, and they're not really inspections, but just visits to see how things are going, and if there's anything we need to address, if there's anything we need to head off. But I'm not a farmer, and so I'm very mindful of the fact that if I have an idea or a suggestion, that it's merely that, and that they're the farmers and I'm the miller. So.
Right. But that kind of involvement is incredible. And so these growers, where do you fit in their picture? Are you one of the few direct buyers? Are they selling grains mostly bulk? What's that look like?
So it started out that sort of I was an also ran. In Texas, two things are king, except for the last few days: oil and cotton. And so these were organic cotton farmers. They were probably also growing peanuts. A lot of my guys are on sandy loam, so peanuts are a viable crop option for them. And then they needed a winter cover. And so they were growing that for forage, or they were growing it to sell as feed. Maybe if they had a really great year, they would sell it to a flour mill, but there was some fatigue, well-established fatigue already going on with large commercial mills and dockage, and the amount of times they were being hit for various things that the mill said was wrong with their product. So I'm sort of the number three in that equation: cotton first, peanuts second, and the wheat and rye third. Since I've taken on some farmers who specialize more in specifically growing grain. But there are very few Texas farmers out there that are not growing cotton. So uh, that's sort of the lay of the land. But I'm really happy usually to be able to follow peanuts. We get enough nitrogen fixing from that we usually have great protein levels, and the performance on the wheat is really strong.
That's so interesting. I mean, agriculture, like Americans, there are so many different cultures of it, you know, so every state has its dynamics, and there are so few people who have the ability to do grains specifically and maybe are doing a multi-year rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Grains represent a soil break, a crop break. And thank God that there's this, I hesitate to call it a luxury market because I don't want to fetishize this stuff. I want luxury to be the norm. I want flavor to be the norm. And we've just got to get it out of the purview of restaurants and back, not to say restaurants are bad, but just to incorporate it into everything, right? But that's part of the battle, is that these big crops are commanding most of a grower's money and attention.
Right.
So it's only with critical pieces of infrastructure, with outliers like yourself deciding to do a jump from music. Tell us about that first career a little
Oh,
bit so
yeah.
people can really appreciate the
Yeah,
leap.
I had 30 years in as a classical musician, mostly conducting, but specializing in early music, so music before 1750. And I think to some degree that might have fed some of my curiosity about landrace grains. I know that Glenn Roberts was into historical architecture and was doing fundraisers with some of these restored properties in the Low Countries and trying to put food on the table that replicated what would have been served when these structures were built. And I was doing sort of similar things, doing receptions and stuff, trying to feed food to audiences that was what would have been consumed, you know, when the music was composed. And so there's a sense of
Right.
curiosity about time and place, and I think that fed some of my interest in doing what I'm doing now. I did manage to make it a year being both a musician and a miller, and then I had to retire because it was totally out of control. So yeah.
Because the cloning didn't
No.
work, you know, you could duplicate yourself only so many times.
Yeah,
Amazing. That's so
we
cool.
thought I thought I was gonna. My wife has worked for the state her whole career. She's worked for the state for 30 years, so she's eligible to retire from that. She's very lucky, so she'll retire relatively early. And she said, "Hey, I don't want you working, you know, past when I'm working. So what are we going to do in retirement?" And the plan was, she's still got 2 years to go. Is that I would do this part time and the music full time, and we'd make it to her retirement date, and then I would really ramp things up. And so I had a really measured plan about sort of making this a slow growth enterprise, and I couldn't control it. It just sort of got away from me, so I had to quit early.
I love it. I'm really glad for that.
Me too. Me too.
Is there anything you'd like people to know about your work as a miller
Hmm.
that you don't think gets voiced?
I mean, it's interesting that even among proponents of this movement, that I do sometimes get kickback about what it costs for a pound of flour. And so a lot of the conversations that I have, even with supporters, are, you know, look, we're not paying farmers 1930s prices for wheat. We're paying farmers 2020 prices for wheat so that it's sustainable. And we're paying our employees in-house a wage that is sustainable for them. And surprisingly, there's so much deprogramming to do revolving around those issues, that you know, wheat and bread have been invisible or not on people's minds. And so there's not a lot of thought given to, what should we expect to pay for those items. And I've just said, I've turned some customers away just saying, this is a fair price because I'm regarding the farmer in the way they should be regarded and regarding my staff the way they should be regarded. And I'd like people to know that, we have to start thinking about, I think we hear it said repeatedly, we need to start thinking about wheat the way we think about an heirloom tomato. But I'm not sure that there's still a connection yet that people really see that all the way through.
Right. I don't think so. You're modeling a true cost food system. And I think it is so very, very hard in staple crops to have to maintain the awareness, even with people being like, oh, there's no flour in the supermarket. Where else does flour come from? Even with that awareness, we have so much more to say. And this is why I wanted to have conversations like this, to be able to help expand the curiosity about this great food and this great layer of relationships that you've invited yourself into these farm lives and into, talk a little bit about the chefs who are working now at the mill. Has that inspired other further culinary explorations?
I don't, in the time we're in right now, I think everybody's just so focused on the here and now,
On survival. Yeah.
But I know that we've always offered stages to our chefs and bakers to come in and work. That's an extra step and an extra liability, and we have to be super careful about that. But it always changes their appreciation for what goes on, and we have a lot of requests for stages from people thinking about getting into the industry. And we talk about it sort of glibly around here, but making flour is not sexy. It seems from the outside looking at Instagram to be such a romantic notion. and I know that I thought that myself, but it is production work. It's repetitive. It can be monotonous. That doesn't mean it's not noble. But it is doing the same thing over and over and doing it very consistently. Baking too, shaping 300 loaves. The romance is going to wear off some. You have to have a passion for that and a belief that what you're doing is important. But we find a lot of people show up for stages and don't come back. So.
That's another incredible service. I think I remember you saying that before, but everybody has to see all the parts of stuff. We need to see each other's work to be able to truly appreciate it.
I think that's one of the reasons I built the education center, and I can't wait to actually use it for the intention that it was built. Right now, it's our fulfillment center, but is being able to educate people about the whole grain system, about what a regional grain hub is and what a regional grain economy is and what the real costs of doing those things are, how to work with our products. We bought a small mill so that we can allow people to have the experience of milling flour to see what that's like and what it takes to be able to make a product that you can work with. I think all of that education is super important. Not to mention the fact that agritourism is a very important contribution to the bottom line in order to make these enterprises sustainable. But I think the education going forward is going to be key.
Yeah. Well, I look very forward to being able to see the mill and teach in that kitchen.
That'll be awesome.
We've got a date whenever the world opens up. I'm not in a rush. I'm really not in a rush. Yeah. Well, anything else you'd like to say about the work?
I think that wraps it up. Just thanks to those people out there that are watching, that are supporting us. It's been, I think, satisfying for everybody in this building to be able to supply something that people need, especially in this time. But we also know that we don't know what the future holds, and once this is all over, what the food economies are going to look like.
Yeah.
I'm the eternal, as my wife will tell you, the eternal pessimist. I'm worried about what's going to happen next. And so we're hoping that, this will sustain us in what will obviously be a flat time for our wholesale customers, after we come out the other side of this. And I feel lucky every day to be able to come to work and have a place to go to work. So thanks to those who are supporting us.
Well, thank you. And please thank everybody at the mill who's doing everything. Really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, great talking with you. You take
You
care.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.